For those of you that watch this brief show every week, you know that this time together is an opportunity for us to gain perspective. That's the name of the show. It is The Perspective. It's a weekly perspective, a weekly opportunity for us to take a few steps back and try to get a clear vision of what's going on around us. Because really in life, perspective is everything. If you're not seeing the events of life and seeing the relationships that you have and all of the different things that you're involved in, if you're not seeing those things clearly, then what happens? You make bad decisions. You go the wrong way. You feel in ways that you shouldn't necessarily feel. Without the right perspective, everything is off. So we live in a world where there is much confusion. We live in a world where there is chaos and there is difficulty and there are so many different things that are hard to understand. And yet in that environment, we try to gain a clear perspective. Because again, perspective is everything. I want to give you one very simple thought. It's something I've talked about before, but something that really I need to be reminded of from time to time, and perhaps you do too. Now, I know there are folks who might watch this that aren't necessarily Christians, or they don't hold to any kind of a biblical worldview. In fact, you may have stumbled on this and you don't know why you stumbled on it because you don't have any opinion on God whatsoever, or maybe you have a negative opinion. I get it. And I'm happy that folks from all over the spectrum are watching, and maybe there's something here that you can take away as well. But I know that the majority of folks who would stumble on a video like this one would be people of faith. Maybe those who would say they're Christians, maybe some other faith tradition, but people of faith, people who would say that God has spoken to us and He has a plan for our lives. To you, I want to speak for just a minute. In the midst of a world that seems out of control, where there's more chaos and confusion than there is peace and understanding, where in our small world of relationships at home and in the big world around us, there is so much conflict, if you want the right perspective, you need to do one very simple thing. You need to learn to think biblically. Because of time, I won't hold you here all day and break down all that means. But you need to think biblically. Here's what we typically do. We think and respond to the events around us in one of three ways. And sometimes these three ways overlap, but one of three ways. We look at what's happening around us and we respond emotionally. That is, how we feel drives what we do. So if it's fear that's being pushed on us, we receive that fear and we become fearful and we respond out of that fear. If things are confusing or uncertain, if the future is unclear, we can respond out of fear. We do things because of how we feel. That's responding emotionally. And can you look around and see how many people in your world are simply responding emotionally? Last week we talked about emotional maturity. Go back and check that out if you'd like to. But so many people think and act emotionally. The second way we sometimes think and often see what's happening around us and then respond is culturally. Culturally, our culture, the people who make up the world in which we live, tell us how to think. We talk about cancel culture. What is cancel culture? It's culture, that is the mob that makes up the world around us, telling us what to think, and if we disagree with that, we're canceled. Our opinion is no longer valid. Because of fear, sometimes we do what the culture tells us to do. We don't think very deeply, we just kind of feel what's happening, acting as a thermometer in the room and then responding to whatever the temperature might be. That is responding or thinking culturally. Those who respond emotionally, there are those who respond culturally. The last one, and we're in a crazy political cycle, and so I bring this up, there are some who think politically. When we talk about left versus right, when we talk about red or blue, we talk about this or that, we're generally not talking about specific issues that we filter through our own worldview or experience. We're asking the question, what does the person on this side of the aisle or that side of the aisle think? I'm aligned to them, I'll think the same. That is thinking politically. It's allowing those in power to tell us what we should believe. The reason there's often so much confusion is because we are not thinking biblically the way God wants us to think. We're not looking at the world the way that God would have for us to look at the world, and we're not responding to the world the way that God would have us to respond to the world. You see, that is looking at things biblically. That is considering things biblically. It's asking this question, not what is important to me, but what's important to God. And once I understand that, I'll go ahead and do that. That's thinking biblically. And yet so often, because it's our habit, we think emotionally, responding simply out of how we feel, culturally allowing the mob to tell us what to think, or politically responding to those who have some kind of authority over us. Do you want to have the right perspective in your life? A number of steps. We talk about this every week. But perhaps the most important thing you can do if you want to see the world right, if you want to have a clear perspective, is to learn to think biblically.